Hello, everyone, and welcome to Quadrant 4 Politics, the podcast where we discuss politics from a libertarian and conservative standpoint. Today is a little bit of a special episode. We have a special guest with us. His name is Jack. Say hello, Jack.
Hi.
Let me see. I'm Riley. I'm your host, along with my co-host, Matt. Say hello, Matt.
Hello.
How are you guys doing today?
Good.
So are you the host and I'm the co-host?
That's fucking right. I'm the leader of this band right now. And we're thinking about names for this episode. We were thinking Matt and Riley jacking off.
I love it.
That's the name of this episode. Or Matt and Riley jacking around. Be perfect.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah. So let me see. There's a couple things. The reason why we wanted to do this episode where we're talking to Jack is because he had a very interesting kind of political transformation, I'd say. Something that both Matt and I think are... we both are interested in different parts of it. Jack, I won't put words into your mouth, but you would say that you went from a atheist conservative to a Christian libertarian. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a good description. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about like how you started, where you ended up, and how you got there.
Yeah, well, let's see. Okay, I guess I'd say it really started about 10 years ago when I was 17. And actually, it really did start with, it was Independence Day, 2009.
Oh,
and,
man,
of
that
course,
memory.
Of course it was, yeah. Independence Day, of course. And I actually started with wanting to write a book, and I can plug it later, but I started a sci-fi fantasy story as a way to kind of, that age when you're 17 and you're kind of figuring yourself out, starting to question things about the world or what beliefs you grew up with or your values or perspectives. And in that spirit of independence, I was just sort of, I think in writing and in fiction, exploring those kind of meta-narratives and everything from politics to religion or spirituality. And so with that, over the years exploring with the writing, I found my political and religious views changing. So I think those were kind of wrapped up together and kind of accidental. I think just through that growth process, I came to different conclusions, by the end of that experience. So,
good deal. So how did you start off as a atheist Christian? Or forgive me, it's late. As an atheist Republican, like how those things don't fit together super great. How did that start?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was, I think just raised in very, focus on the world in front of you. Very much a focus on survival or survival of the fittest, or how to live in this life. And I think, honestly, probably my main bent on politics was being pro-war. I
remember you saying you were a hawk.
Yeah, I was very hawkish, and I think probably because when I was a kid, 9/11 scared the crap out of me, and so
yeah.
From that point on, I was raised with a very kind of pro-authority, pro-order, societal order, but particularly, this idea of pro-war on terror. Very hyper-patriotic, very kind of, let's go out there and shoot the bad guys first, and, kind of if you have to kill the hostage, oh well, kind of thing, like that mindset. And that drove me for a time. And then I think the first time I really got to vote was, 2010 and 2012. And I think when Obama won, the Republican shift was, under Bush, it was the pro-war, hyper, patriotic. And in my case, I think I had very nationalistic views. In fact, I even, on my binder at school, in high school, I had this world map on there. And I remember I drew it where I had the outline of the United States, and it was filled in one color, and it said U.S., right? But it kind of looks like us.
Yeah.
And then all the rest of the world was filled out a different color, and it said them. I was literally like an us versus them mindset. It was like, whatever America's doing, I'm pro-America, pro everything in our history, everything. I would just defend America against anything. Any
Dude,
attack.
See, I'm like that in a different way right now, as in, like, I only care about what's going on in our country. Everyone else can go fuck themselves. You know, they can
Yeah.
govern themselves. We don't need to be the police of the world.
Oh yeah, if I wanted to leave everyone alone, except I was like, no, America must conquer the earth and be its, it's that kind of neoconservative, very very interventionist mindset.
Are you like that at all, Matt? We've never really talked about, like, the military action with you. Would you consider yourself a hawk?
Not a hawk, but I think we talked about it a little bit. One of the questions we did in episode 0, I was just reading back on it, was sometimes it is necessary to break international law for the good of the country or whatnot, and I think my answer was agree, because what is international law?
Yeah.
And ultimately I think it is important to protect the homeland, and I would say I'm pro-America, but I'm not...
What about the war on terror? Was that a waste of money?
Well, the war on terror was a response to, a devastating situation in which you had every senator and 434 out of 435 representatives voting yes for it. I don't think that was anything that anybody thought was out of the question. How it developed over time is different, and in retrospect, I don't think I was kind of young to now have some view on it, but if we are attacked, I would say yes, we take action. I think as Americans and as citizens of this country, it's not bad to carry a little bit of pride for your country and to want your country to do well.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I'm a hawk. I don't know. I'm not pro-war for the sake of war.
But like a self-defense mindset, you're thinking, right? Like a self-preservation. Yeah. In response to attack kind of mindset.
I guess I wouldn't say I would never be for a preemptive strike, but it would have to be very well justified. But I don't make those decisions. But I support or
you don't
not
have the big
support
red
them.
button.
I don't
it's
have
not
the
in
big
your
red,
room
no.
somewhere. Covered
but,
under a pile of clothes.
One of the other shut up, really. One of the other questions was I would always support my country whether or not it was right or wrong, and I believe I answered agree to that. And not that I would necessarily agree with what the country was doing wrong, but I would still be proud to be an American ultimately.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it would be happy our country is doing things that are wrong.
So getting back to Jack, what were one or two like really big things that started changing your mind?
Yeah, okay, so I guess Bush era, high school and stuff. I remember arguing with classmates about the war stuff, and at the time it was Democrats who were anti-war, and I perceived them as being weak or giving into terrorists or being too soft in some way. And then interestingly, when the flip happened, when Obama and the Democrats won, suddenly the Republican focus was less to do with war and more to do with it was like the Tea Party way, 2010, 2012, like limited government, and that's when I kind of became more informed about how and why to stop things like socialism or these big government programs, Healthcare Act, all that. And I feel like it's ironic in that it was Republican mindset or ideology during the Obama years in resisting, suddenly kind of becoming more anti-authoritarian in their language, resisting government and the federal government stuff that they helped me start questioning government in general, right? Because before I was very pro-government, pro-America, pro-war, and it's only seeing all the other ways in which government failed to achieve its goals, whether it was fighting the war on drugs or the welfare state, or the various ways in which people have been further impoverished or hurt by certain government programs and policies, especially domestic ones at home. That opened my eyes and started making me go, okay, wait, what else is government not doing well, And I think even at the time, Ron Paul was a big door opener like he has been for many kind of libertarian types.
He was a libertarian moment a little bit.
Yeah, certainly. And because this is a guy who was, pushing against his stuff during Bush, of course, but then I think I didn't take him seriously or pay attention to him until the Obama years, probably 2012 when he was in the primary and so forth. Just because it was so different, and it I think when you're in that kind of echo chamber of only listening to the news or people that you already kind of agree with or in your camp, it takes someone coming into that world or bubble saying things that are different for you to hear them. Because, if I hear a Democrat, at the time being anti-war during the Bush years, I was like, I'm not going to listen to him. He's a Democrat. He's the bad guy, But to hear a supposed, quote-unquote fellow Republican saying, hey, these wars are actually causing this, or they're backfiring, this blowback, our own government is doing, shady things, or maybe even furthering terrorism and so forth, it felt like coming from, quote-unquote, my side or my team, so I had better ears for it a little bit, and so that kind of got the ball rolling. And then, of course, like we talked about, I think reading Atlas Shrugged and Ayn Rand, and kind of further deepening my mistrust of government. And I think those were the last idols, if you will, that I sort of had to give up because, like I said, I grew up without religion. And so patriotism and Americanism or nationalism was my religion in some way,
I saw there's a metal libertarian rap metal band, and they have a song called "Statheist," and it's about atheists who worship the state. Like they act like they don't have a god, but they pray to the altar of government. I thought that was pretty funny. But what were you saying? What you were saying about when you were becoming a libertarian, which was probably before me. I didn't even really pay attention in politics. After high school, I was too focused on being cool. So,
same here.
But it sounds like you were kind of parallel to what the country was with libertarianism, because the libertarian candidates weren't even on the national ballots for president until 2012, right? That's when they were the first time nationally on every...
Right, yeah, ballot access was a big thing. 2012 was Gary Johnson ran that. But 2016 I think was the big, at least for me. Well, that was a
big win for us, as a party.
Yeah, where everyone had a chance to even vote on some of this stuff. And I think probably around 2014, and I was focused on the books too, and kind of exploring and learning what I believed through the writing. But I think probably by 2014 I had just stopped caring about politics. Yeah, exactly. I given up on the Republican Party. I didn't quite know how I felt still about war and other stuff, and I kind of stepped away, and I didn't even pay attention to the 2016 election until the last minute, last few months, and suddenly I rediscovered libertarianism and the Libertarian Party. And I think the two major planks or parts of the libertarian philosophy I had trouble reconciling earlier on was the war stance and probably the abortion stance. I was kind of became more pro-life at the time, and then it was only through understanding ways in which one could be pro-choice but also anti-abortion at the same time that clicked for me. And then also the war thing I think was the last.
Were you always pro-life?
I think I had leaned that way, and that's interesting because from a more atheist perspective, but I had contact with religion. I had
well, I mean, it comes down to a moral thing whether you're atheist or not, because people view it as taking a life whether God says it or not.
Right, exactly. That has as much to do with philosophy and even science too.
Matt, if you were atheist, you would still be pro-life, right?
Well,
or
the thing I think is interesting about atheists is that if you guys believe this is just it, you're robbing some poor little thing of its only chance to ever experience life. That's I think more cruel than if there was nothing after this. But
it's there's that show called Review, and the subtitle is Life. It's the only thing we have, but is it any good? So
but I basically the final pivot I think for me was seeing the ways in which honestly I like the way Justin Amash, the way he described the last 10 years of politics, perfectly summarized to me what I had been going through and feeling. It was okay, limited government, we're gonna fight the Democrats, or big government, we're going to infuse ourselves into the Republican Party and change things. And then over the years, slowly, all these Republicans turning on those limited government principles, and especially once they got into power, and now with the rise of nationalism and sort of the Trump effect and these other things kind of coalescing. By 2016, I knew I was libertarian, became a dues-paying member, and
You got that cool little card.
Yeah, I got the card in the mail.
You got that bumper sticker.
Yeah, I now got the bumper sticker as of like last week or two. Yeah, and it coincided with the spiritual aspect. I think in large part because at least in my understanding of reading through the Bible and coming to my own sort of perspective on it, I saw it as a very interestingly anti-authoritarian or almost anarchic message in a way. I mean, not only with the early Christians, kind of resisting Rome and the state and being persecuted, but this theme throughout the Bible of God basically saying, saying that government is its own idol. People demanding a king or wanting a ruler and turning from God as their ruler. These kind of themes come up, and
this is where I want Matt to chime in because I know he has a different opinion on this.
I suspect
and I'm
so.
curious.
Well, I don't think Jack's wrong. I think he's got a good point, but there are other things like the direction to follow man's law, as long as it doesn't contradict with God's law. Mm-hmm. Jesus also says when he's questioned about taxes, he says, "Whose face is on this coin? It's Caesar's. Give to Caesar's what is Caesar's." Pretty much saying, taxes, like, they're not my thing. You do with your government what you're gonna do. Mm-hmm. My kingdom is not of this world. So, two separate planes, kind of. But I don't think that necessarily makes Jack wrong. I think it's just two different schools of thought, kind of.
Yeah.
Sure, or the degree to which one could permit government, or maybe even priorities, right? Like, I see it as almost, in some sense, not only that scene in particular, but some others, the overall pattern I noticed in reading some of anything related to the state versus whichever group of people at the time. Yeah, exactly. Like you said, this overriding idea that God's law is the higher law. To be good and just and moral is more important than the details of the governing affairs of us mortals. But I think in this overall sense, I got this impression that the kingdoms of the earth, the nations, are in some sense Satan's right now. I mean, it's like, if you want to spice up conversations, let's bring in Satan. But even if whether you see
I'm
that
pro
literally
Satan at this table, by the way.
Yeah, we can do that.
Over here.
Oh well, I should tell you too, on my spiritual journey, my brief flirtation with Satanism, which was also a part of that exploration. But I think because in spirit, I saw this idea that people who were pro-authority or anti-authority could also be connected to whose authority are you talking about, right? So when it comes to God, pro-authority, right? The true just authority or author of the universe, who's worth listening to, who's worth obeying, versus human authority, worldly authority, governing bodies who are, in some sense, putting themselves in the place of God or seeking to, at least through a lot of history, that's what a lot of the kings and pharaohs and the rest do. Yeah, I mean, maybe not as extreme yet, but certainly that kind of leaning where the temptation, it's very much, it's like Lord of the Rings, the Ring of Power. It must go to Mordor and be destroyed, and those who keep trying to wield government or use it for what they would hope to be godly purposes, even if it doesn't have to necessarily be Christianity, but their own values of right and wrong, right? Whether it's atheist, socialist, or Christian, whatever's this idea that those who try to use the state or government and use force and violence, effectively have butchered literally their own goals. Just like with these other topics we're talking about, like war on drugs, war on terror, like, oh, right, the blowback effect, or this idea of turning from letting God sort things out, or the sort of invisible hand of the, market, or, the independent decisions of all these, people on earth.
But can God not use the government to work things out?
Certainly, yeah. And I think that's where you see the interplay of God implying and saying repeatedly that the state or human authorities are invalid, and yet using them for his purposes. So allowing them to exist, to use them for things like punishment or discipline, or to make a point, right? I mean, how many times has he warned people, if you do this, this nation's going to come and, kick the crap out of you. And then if you disobey me here, then I will turn on you this way, and
flood the earth kind of stuff.
Yeah, and almost like God's like this anarchist stepping back, watching the, someone who could step in, and if they wanted to, impose order in a very direct way, right? And yet who chooses to step back and win people to the truth, to the peace, through love, through, showing up and showing us how it's done, right? And through words. And this, I love that even, I remember in my atheist / would-be Luciferian days, I remember thinking of right, the Bible, for one, I initially just assumed, oh, it can't possibly be true. This must be things written by man, and that's it, But people have that impression, right, of like Old Testament mean God and New Testament nice God. But you read both, and there's this beautiful balance of the two, of judgment and mercy, and death and life. And I see I see this God who is I don't think I'm losing my train of thought. Speaking of,
what do you think, Matt? Do you have any response to that at all?
Well, no. I mean, he's explaining.
Well, I mean, like, do you, does your religion have any impact on your politics?
So I think mine's kind of been, I think mine would kind of work in reverse of how Jack's has been, which is just how God works, because he doesn't work the same with any two individuals, and I love it. And but I grew up in church, and I grew up surrounded by conservatives, and I was very staunchy. And while I would still say I'm more conservative than libertarian, I am no longer conservative just for the sake of conservatism, and things like loving God and loving my neighbor are more important to me than politics. I would rather win someone to the kingdom of God than win someone to the Republican Party.
Right,
right. I would rather
and
God
people
be
confuse the two.
Exactly. And I would rather God be glorified than a Republican win an election. I think for me it just on the two sides, I tend to be more libertarian than authoritarian. My most recent results on the political compass test show not much. I just slightly lean that way. I do think government is a little bit necessary. I think it's kind of what keeps order, and we all have to live by a system of rules while we're here on Earth. But I don't think we're talking about things that are mutually exclusive. We're talking about, what we're doing here on Earth and what we're doing in heaven, what we're doing in our personal lives and what the government's doing in our personal lives, Yeah.
It's funny, Matt, because you don't identify as a libertarian, but if you look at like the official Libertarian Party, like Jack and I are more anarcho-capitalists, more on the extreme side. But if you look at what the actual party is doing, like the people who are actually running for elections and stuff, they're not looking at the crazy stuff that Jack and I are into, Like some of the presidential candidates are, Adam Kokesh, he wants to abolish the government and stuff.
There's different wings of the party,
but I think that if you look at like the official standpoint, that you would agree with like 99% of this stuff. What is
that may be
keeping you away from that title
of libertarian?
Yeah.
Well, because basically what's keeping me away from it is society, because society is identified people by left and right. And with it's, on the political spectrum, there's the x-axis, which is left and right.
Yeah.
And then there's the y-axis, which is authoritarian, libertarian.
Yeah.
People aren't so much concerned with that, so I'm not gonna, like, you guys.
You mean like general public?
Exactly.
Okay.
So when I tell somebody, like, I tend to be a conservative, or I fall onto the conservative side of things. Now, I don't say libertarian because half people don't know what the definition is, and I also see a necessity for government. But also getting back to, religion and my faith. Like, originally I would have, said regarding abortion, it's disgusting, lock up anyone who does it. Now I've gotten to a point that says, I still think it's disgusting, but have compassion on the people who are in that situation. I no longer support the death penalty because I don't think it's a pro-life thing. That doesn't fall under a pro-life umbrella. And if we're all, if we're all guilty by original sin, then isn't that fetus just as guilty as the person sitting in the electric chair? So my views have definitely changed as a result of my faith in God, because ultimately I've been able to understand. I've been able to try to look at people more the way I think God would want.
Yeah,
I love that.
To look at them.
Okay, I'm going to pounce. Here we go. I love this. This is what roped me into, and it was that sense of valuing human life, right, and valuing people's choices, freedom to choose, and their voluntary choices, right, and I saw in the Libertarian the non-aggression principle and a lot of their philosophical
Matt and I are a little bit unclear about that. What is
the non-aggression principle?
Like, I know I should know because I call myself a
libertarian. It's great. I'll happily explain.
Like, I'm just a little bit lazy.
It's basically it's basically saying it's a rejection of the use of force to achieve social or political goals.
Right. Okay.
This idea that force should not be initiated. Force should only ever be used in self-defense or in response to force in an equal measure, right? Kind of like a minimum force necessary, required kind of thing. This idea that this is something that I think has helped me see where libertarianism might be the future of liberals and conservatives, because if you have these different value groups, right, whether they're religious or atheist, people have their personal values, their opinions on what should or shouldn't be done with society, and they're all arguing about the should and shouldn't. And I think what each side can get caught up in is the temptation to use that ring of power or use government to impose their thought of what should be done as what can and can't be done, right? And I think what helped me see with the non-aggression principle and the libertarian mindset, even if it's not always clear what degree, right? Where do you draw the line? Is the official stance is limited government, and it spells out these very carefully defined functions and checks and balances, or no government, right? Just pure anarchy, and but of a peaceful kind, a sort of peaceful natural order emerging. But rather than focus on those details, I think if you focus on the idea that you don't want to initiate violence against someone to accomplish a goal, it's only then that you can see why, speaking of libertarian candidates, why they represent these different wings of the party so well, why Dan Berman is wearing a taxation is theft hat, right? If you see that the entire superstructure,
the libertarian candidate who wears
big yellow hat,
big goofy yellow hat that says taxation.
And it says taxation is theft, right on there. And I think when you see it that way, right, it's like think of government as, and this is why I say to more left-wing liberal friends, I'm like, look, you're afraid of anarchy having these corporations or monopolies, right? You're afraid of a monopolistic corporation that could somehow take over the world or do something. And then I read off a checklist and I go, okay, in what way is government not literally that thing right now, right? It has a monopoly on the use of force, on any industry it gets into. It's this giant superstructure who literally profits through the threat of violence. When you really break it down, I mean, everything about government is funded through taxation. And when you really stare taxation in the face and define it, you understand that it's something you're paying for without your consent, or at least, as the founders probably would have put it, taxation without representation in the government is a great moral wrong. And I think this takes a step further and says taxation is wrong, period. But not necessarily that these government structures or society organizing itself to create order is wrong, but that they should be voluntarily funded through donations or through some kind of means that doesn't involve these
The non-aggression principle applies to taxes in that if you don't pay your taxes, they put you in a fucking cell for the rest of your life.
And the justification has always been, well, this service is rendered, right? Like a company. You don't walk into a store and you grab something off the shelf and leave. They're going to try and make you pay, or they might get a little rough with you if something happens. But I think there's this idea that at the very least, right, you want as much representation. In the same way that in the market, you're at least in a company, no matter how bad or messed up a company gets, you're always allowed to withdraw your consent. You can withdraw your money. You can go to a competitor. There's this sense of, and it holds them accountable in a much more direct and deep way, right? Because, I mean, we see this in I'm sure our free market, general shared values, I would imagine, that good companies and bad companies rise and fall. But, right, they're more answerable to their customers because we have the power of the purse. We can withdraw our consent in that way. And it's the same for government. It's like if we could withdraw our tax money, or at least make it so the government can't just extract it every which way. I mean, you break down the taxes too, and you're like, man, it's not just the taxes in my paycheck right now. It's like every product I'm buying has a whatever % business tax price rolled into it.
Well, we were literally talking about this the last episode we recorded, which we were talking about taxes, and I explained how about a third of our money goes to taxes, whether it's what they're taking out of our check, property tax, sales tax. About a third of what we make goes to taxes, and what I suggested was that we should have some more say in where that goes. So,
certainly, right? Yeah, if it's already being taken from me, you might as well have a say on what happens to it.
I think that's something that we would all be happy with at the table. It'd still suck that we get taxed and we can't opt out of it. But if at least we could say where our money was going, I don't want to fund ICE. I don't want to fund Planned Parenthood.
Right, like an item list breakdown.
I just I want it to go to the local school. I want it to go to the military to keep me safe, and the police force. And
I think where the difference between me and you two is that I think taxes are a necessary evil.
I don't think for that on the last episode.
I don't think anybody's going to pay for the road just because they want to,
Roads.
But my roads.
No, it's okay.
But
I had the same questions.
Parents can, decide they want some of their tax money or whatnot to go to schools. People who drive can do infrastructure. People who want to have abortions can do Planned Parenthood, And everybody gets to decide where their taxes go instead of it going into this pot of money and then the government deciding how to spend it. That would be to me more representation.
Absolutely.
For our taxes.
Yeah, especially if we got to choose how much members of Congress got to make actually.
Yeah, these are all small helpful steps I think that could hold the government slightly more accountable. I think philosophically there is a tipping point, at least was for me, because I had all the same questions. As I fell deeper into my libertarianism, I also not only I think on the moral front of what is taxation, how is this structure funded through the threat of violence. If you keep focused on that, you see it more clearly, right? Because if government's so great and can build these roads, why can't it just ask for the money, right? And then I think when you point out to people too, you go, well, they're taking the money for the roads, the schools, the infrastructure, but have you seen the roads, the schools, the infrastructure? Are they actually doing the things they were taking the money for? And therefore, this is a sense of a breach of contract, right? Okay, if they're taking the money because it's this necessary evil, you ask, well, are they not just doing it for more evil than the good it was supposed to be for? And then I think what blew my mind too was to find out how much throughout history people have been able to privately fund things like roads and schools and all these things we kind of take for granted and assume have to be public projects. But I mean, especially you look at churches and the early churches too in Christianity and so forth. As you saw the temple structure break down and the organized religious structure break down, and I think theologically this synergy of God basically setting up, you know, the law and the prophets and the theocracy and the organized structure and the kings and so forth, from my theological perspective, precisely to show people that they couldn't have a substitute for God, that their priests couldn't save them, their kings couldn't save them, their law couldn't save them from sin. You know, all it could do was reveal and expose sin for what it was. And therefore, theologically, God basically saying, I will be your leader, your source of life. Trust in me, not in your princes, you see this breakdown of these structures and a loosening of those, I guess, like you said, necessary evils, or these entities kind of trapped in their own cycle of sin and sacrifice, and a kind of so I mean there's some thematic elements here that I'm trying to tie together. But
Matt, do you at least think that some institutions of government would be better off privatized?
Oh, absolutely.
And which ones would you say?
Social Security, first of all.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Right away, immediately, day one of the McReynolds administration. And then
bleep.
Day one of my administration. Let's see.
The roads. Can we privatize the roads?
I don't have
I'll send you the links.
I don't have the notes right now to think about all of it.
What about education?
But it's a good question. It's good that you are asking this, by the way. I mean, keep going. But these are all the right questions to ask someone who's proposing to privatize.
The thing is though, I'm never going to get real excited about libertarianism like you guys are, because I don't put my faith in it, and I don't really have my faith in one political party or another. It's kind of like, the y-axis is how much is the government going to get involved, and the x-axis is where do your morals lie, and that's kind of what I'm thinking about. And how much the government gets involved, to me, is kind of like what you were saying, doesn't really matter, because I don't answer to them. I answer to a higher power, and his name is Jesus.
And that's an interesting point. Yeah, this idea that the kingdom is coming, and it's like God saying, look, don't worry, I'm going to crush all these, all these fuckers under my foot. Don't you worry. Kingdom's coming. All the nations, all these would-be kings or would-be gods are going to lose, and we have that reassurance, right? Christ already, defeated the devil and is, basically he's just trying to, it's like a retreating army, and we know we have the final victory. So there's that sense of oh yeah, obviously aim towards God, do that. I think what took me further beyond that, and I think that's why I stayed away from politics too, and I didn't really care to stay for the Republican Party, but I didn't necessarily care to focus on libertarianism, because I remember thinking, a kingdom's not of this world. I may as well just not wait to die, but not do anything, because I'm reassured that, right, heaven's waiting, or the kingdom of God's coming soon. But then I remembered this theme in the Bible again that was saying, okay, show me your faith without works, or show me your works without faith, and this idea of, okay, yes, you have reassurance the kingdom's coming, but what can you do right now to show people what that kingdom looks like? Tell them it's there, and resist those rulers and authorities and principalities and forces of darkness that are currently reigning.
Yeah,
I think to sort of push towards that.
I get
kingdom.
what you're saying, but the Great Commission isn't go spread libertarianism to all corners of the world. It's
spread love. Spread love and the message. Yeah.
My concern with my major annoyance. By the way, we're at 40 minutes now, so we should probably start wrapping it up. But my major annoyance with the left-right on the spectrum is that it doesn't make any fucking sense at all. It doesn't make sense that Democrats are, if you're a Democrat, you have you have to be pro-choice and anti-gun. Like, that doesn't make any sense because those things are completely unrelated.
It's like you can't have any nuance or
it's like what if you're
breakdown.
pro-life, or what if you're pro-choice and pro-gun, as I am? It doesn't make any sense that
it's like tribalistic and all or nothing.
It doesn't, like, with libertarian, there is a strict definition of that. Libertarian stands for liberty. Left and right, like, it's just whatever fuck they want to
Right, it's a culture war.
Like, they choose, we're going to be pro-choice, but we're also going to be pro-gun.
And it's like, I'm opposite whatever that guy is. He's for that, I'm against it. It's like, it's kind of
getting back to, we talked about how faith and politics tied together. And what I found is that the issues that I'm more liberal on are the ones I'm more passionate on. Abolishing the death penalty, fixing our jail system, ending solitary confinement, ending torture. Those are all things that I am, and then you throw in, like, abortion and religious freedom, which are things further on the right. But some of the things that I'm most passionate about are some of the things I'm more liberal about. It just happens to be I tend to agree with the right more often, and if the libertarians make it to the political stage, which they won't, but if it happens, I will consider voting for them.
Fingers crossed, man.
No, well, and this is the beauty of it. Something I think Larry Sharp says that I really love is libertarianism is the only political movement that doesn't require conversion. People think, how's it possible you're telling me to be a libertarian? But what it's really saying is, no, you can still be a conservative. You can still be a liberal. All you're basically getting the two to agree on is not to use government to impose those values on one another.
You're welcome to have a socialist compound.
And I think
right, it's like live and let live. It's basically saying, look, we agree that we're different. We're never going to rule over each other. 50% of the country is not going to effectively, or at least without serious problems, rule over and control the other half of the country. It's never going to happen. It's like, you may as well live and let live and agree to use your free speech, your persuasion, your cultural values, your ideas to win the day, and live and let live. And that includes for funding stuff. And therefore you can still have public institutions, but there would have to be some kind of neutrality established in which they're very right. So this is the minarchism versus anarchism, and this brings me back to libertarian candidates, because the top three right now that I'm paying attention to, I think perfectly illustrate this conversation they're having right now. You've got your you've got Adam Kokesh, who's saying, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to dissolve the federal government and then go through a bankruptcy process, give it back to the states, and then the states in turn may, if they want, distribute it to the local governments and counties. And he's like, I'm ready to throw the ring in the fire and destroy it and decentralize. And his emphasis is not so much get rid of all government. He's saying localized government, right? Like, if the local community wants to organize and do something or build the roads here, they can, and have basically, he even described, I think, like 500 independent little nations in the U.S.
States' rights.
Yeah, or even deeper than that, like local community
500
rights.
State. I mean, that
It would be counties.
Independent nations.
Every
Yeah,
county.
basically all the counties, right? Or something like that. And then,
this is where we turn Matt off. He's like, are you kidding me?
That's the Frodo.
Because here's the thing: is once you establish libertarianism, this is what I've said. Is you guys are going to be like, okay, we've got it. Government's gone. Now we need to start figuring out how we're going to pay for things. And we're going to take a little bit from everybody. Now, how do we keep order? All right, we're going to come up with a list of rules. We can't spend all our time doing that. We're going to elect people to do it for us. And then libertarianism
I'm getting there.
is gone.
All right, check this out, right? That's okay. So Kokesh, destroy the Ring of Power. Kim Ruff right now, she's saying, you know what? Let's just get back to constitutional limitations of government. So more of a minarchism, right? Like a limited government with function for police, military, courts, right? Basic order, right?
That, yeah.
Right. That's the actual libertarian, I think, general platform message. And yet Kim Ruff also says her goal for society eventually is to reach the more anarcho-capitalistic or fully free society. But she understands that there's only so much you can do this is a step-by-step process, and it has to be agreed upon at every stage of the deconstruction, and that at the least this limited government option is there, and then of course, and you got Dan Berman, taxation is theft, and his emphasis, but these different wings or spectrums kind of reveal, and then you've got like the Justin Amash types, who he's not officially libertarian yet, but he's libertarian leaning, and obviously believes in most of the basic structures of government, but clearly wants to stop a lot of it or slow down a lot of it. But point being that, so I think where the Libertarian Party has this alliance is, okay, society and the size of government is right now on floor 99, right? And it's racing towards the top floor, and it's going to smash into the ceiling, and we're all going to die, is basically the thought. And all the different wings of the Libertarian Party, whether they want zero government on floor 0, or they want very limited government on floor 10 or 20, they're all in agreement, like, okay, look, we need to start going down. They're like, we're racing up towards the ceiling. Republicans and Democrats are increasingly taking us on higher floors. We're racing up. They're not slowing us down enough. Every now and then a Republican might, slow a little bit, but it's always racing up. And it seems like the mutual agreement among the various factions is, look, we need to start going down. We can argue later about whether we should be on floor 20 or 10 or 0, but at that point, if we succeed at even getting government down to like 20% of what it does right now, like, that might be so much of a victory in and of itself that even the anarchists will go home and be like, all right, that's good, that's fine, that's good enough for me, or they may then form their own party that's the full anarchist party, something to try and deconstruct that limited government. But at the least, it would prepare society to transition, I think, more peacefully into what might be an inescapable anarcho-capitalistic future, partially on the basis of technology and where it's going. I mean, this idea that we're going to be able to hide our currencies, cryptocurrencies, it'll be untaxable in the first place. So then people can argue all day about whether it's necessary, but it'll be impossible, to tax people. And they'll have to ask for their money and prove their worth, right? And you may have a situation in which government, we may look back on government like we look back on slavery, where we'll look back and we're like, how did that go for so long? And how did forced labor, or in this case, forced taxation, why was that morally acceptable back then? How did that go on for so long and wasn't questioned more often? And I think in order to get to that stage where society's ready to kind of reorganize itself, and I think here's how it'll happen, less by country or land or borders or elected governments, but almost like these overlapping kingdoms or services, much like companies today, right? People walk around and they have their own insurance companies or their own whatever, and no one knows. You're not wearing on your sleeve. You're not required to vote or register with these companies. I mean, you just have goods and services provided to you, and you could have people who live in the same area and they use completely different internet providers or phone companies or go to entirely different grocery stores, and there's already kind of this like overlapping goods and services and this like layered society that organizes itself voluntarily. I mean, people show up to the store and they choose whether they want to buy it, and people hear that a company do something bad, they boycott it or they go to someone else, and there might be this free-flowing societal order that emerges, and maybe not in a utopian sense, but at the least one in which power and authority is decentralized, in which no one can effectively take over and become a monopoly because it's too hard, because people can it's kind of like as the state's power decreases, the individual's power increases, and suddenly individuals can better organize and resist. And it also means individuals can cause harm, right? I mean, when you're 3D printing your own machine guns and bazookas in your garage, like, you could as an individual go try and do a lot of harm with that, but you also have like hundreds of other individuals who can shoot back or push back and do something, and so
that is an amazing thought to wrap up on. Just everyone having machine guns that they 3D printed.
In any case, painting a vision of the maybe future that libertarianism might help us transition to safely rather than radically overnight with chaos, which I think you would fear is a chaotic void in the power vacuum.
And I guess this is kind of where I end on, is I agree with you guys, and I will be fine, worrying more about that y-axis instead of the x-axis left and right once we get there. But, in the end, people's personal morality is still going to be important to them.
Yeah.
But I don't have any really problem with the direction you want to see things go. I just don't have a lot of faith it's going to happen because because any system ran by people is just doomed to fall. So,
well, before we wrap up the show, Jack, you wrote a book. Please tell us about it.
Oh, yes. Okay, so, all my big fat political religious musings aside, I think in a more deep way, and I think this is always true even on all these subjects, right? Because we talk about them and we kind of reason stuff out and argue it out, but I think people are honestly more changed and moved and motivated by through their entertainment, through their fiction, through
absolutely.
You just encounter something that moves you, whether it's music or something. It's usually through art that people express or find out new things about themselves. And so I know in my case, writing the book series, the first one's called The Royal Green.
The Royal Green by Jack Casey.
Yes, Jack
it's on
Casey.
Amazon, Kindle.
Yes, Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. You can order a paperback. It's the first book out. I released it in July, Independence Day, 10 years after I started it. I've got sequels kind of locked and loaded, ready to go. But yeah, I know for me, I didn't know the answer to all these questions necessarily when I started, and I probably still don't know enough, and will always need to learn more, and always ask God's forgiveness for not knowing enough. But I know for me, it was in writing and exploring these themes with the characters. Each one kind of comes to embody some of these ideas, these conflicting thoughts or philosophies. You've got your blood-soaked knight character whose ends justify the means, kill and do whatever you must to protect the throne.
So it's a good read for non-Christians as well.
I hope it has something for everyone who would pick it up.
There's people like Riley who...
I'm an atheist. I'm enjoying it so far. I'm only a chapter in, but
yeah,
so far I'm enjoying it.
Well, because when I started writing, I didn't quite know what I wanted to think or feel about everything. I was generally, I think, books and those kind of things, they're like this dream space or like this meta narrative or this almost like a virtual reality where I think writer and reader both is exploring deeper parts about themselves psychologically, but also thoughts and views about the world, and you kind of see it manifest in the characters and their conflicting, like I mentioned, it's like the blood-soaked knight character, and then there's the diplomatic leader character trying to make peace, and then you have your rebellious freedom-loving spirit character, and I think these deeper concepts always manifest themselves through characters and stories, and so and I think much in the same way that God speaks to people through parables and stories. I think it's a similar idea, and anyway, I wrote the book. I would hope people would buy it and give it a try. It's a great nerdy, fun. There's a lot of homage in some way to kind of like the tropes of the RPG or role-playing genre, because I grew up with video games and role-playing games, and it was kind of like my kind of realistic kind of like magical realism or something take on some of those ideas, and I had a lot of fun with it too. And
again, that was The Royal Green.
Yes, The Royal Green.
Jack Casey.
Yes. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Leave a review.
We'll post a link about it in our video.
We'll post the Amazon link in the comments,
yes,
or in the description of both YouTube and SoundCloud. But that's been our show for the day. Was there any final thing you want to say?
I guess I'll say, look, whether anyone agrees or disagrees with my personal views, I would like to think the book series would be entertaining for you regardless. So
everyone needs to open their mind a little bit.
And we are going to also have Jack with us next week just for our regular round of questioning.
Yeah, if you're a fan of Jack, stick around. We got more.
Thanks.
We'll be doing some more jacking around.
I'm a fan of me.
Dude, I'm a fan of me
sometimes
too.
I'm not.
Yeah, right. Sometimes I want to put a gun
Jack,
in my
you're
head.
the worst.
And again,
Get out of
it'll
here.
be just our regular random questions, so who knows what we'll be asking, and maybe we'll get a few different opinions, but we'll be doing that next week. So.
All right.
Cool.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, guys.
You can please like, comment, and subscribe. You can find us on YouTube and SoundCloud, and share us with your friends so we can get some more viewers. That'd be awesome. And if you have any questions or comments, you can send them directly to us at quadrant4politics@gmail.com. That's the number 4, not spelled out, quadrant4politics@gmail.com. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.